Okay, we should be live. I don't know exactly how live or how many people are going to show up. We'll see. But we'll stick around for a while because I don't really have a sophisticated stream setup. I don't even have any streaming software. It's just YouTube's webcam microphone talk at the internet interface. I can mute myself, I can share a screen, I can share the stream. I can't really do anything to like boost my own audio, so I hope I'm not super quiet. Let's do some checks, and then we will see if anyone wants to show up. Oh, I have to watch an ad to look at my own stream. Can you believe that? Hello, Francisco. I don't know why your emoticon got held by YouTube's AutoMod. All right, so my audio seems fine. Okay, I guess I'll keep this up just in case. Actually, it looks like Francisco might have chatted that a while ago in preparation for the stream. So we'll see. We'll hang out until, who knows, however long. But yeah, I'm available. I'll just hang out here. And if anyone has any questions, feel free to ask about anything. It could be Warframe related or not. We'll see. We'll see. This is my first time trying something like this, so I don't know if anyone wants to show up for it. Boop, 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 boop. Yeah, I would say I know that people who live stream, like for real, typically start the stream up for like 5 to 10 minutes or so to let people show up. But most of the people that I watch are also very popular, and people jump in like right away. I'm not under any false impression that that I am huge enough to get people to just drop what they're doing and jump into the stream. But yeah, we'll stick with the live stream going for a while. Okay. Let's see. I do not have anything prepared. I could have like grabbed a book or something. Mm-hmm. I don't know, basic live streaming on YouTube, not very sophisticated. Can't play music. No sources. I suppose I could share the screen. Sharing the screen would just show you me again over there. Mm-hmm. Oof. Let's see. Today's been kind of a harrowing day. A lot has happened, mainly waking up, doing a lot of household chores, a lot of cleaning, a lot of dusting, driving out, buying things, air filters, buying food for my cats. And then my little cat, Jazz, he had his annual appointment and rabies shot today. He is terrible at the vet's office. He likes to fight. He doesn't like to be weighed. He doesn't respond to treats or catnip or anything. But we were able to they were able to successfully complete his checkup and get him his annual rabies shot. So that's good. And we'll have to worry about that again in a couple months' time when it is Calypso's vet appointment. But she's so much easier. She barely even knows she's at the vet when she goes there. She just wants to explore, run around. She's easy. The only reason we can't get a weight for her is because she jumps off of the only reason we can't get a weight for her is because she jumps off of the scale. But they're both healthy weights. Calypso might be a little bit too big. We had to cut back her food because she was getting real swole, real chonky, always exercising, always eating, jumping. That one was getting so swole that her collar wasn't fitting anymore. And it was clearly fat, right? I'm not saying it was muscle, but it was fat. But we perhaps were a little bit overzealous feeding her 2 large cans of food a day because she was eating all of it, and she was a growing kitty. She's only 2 years old now. But once she started growing wide instead of growing out, we're like, all right. Scale it back a little bit. Now they eat about the same. But yeah, if anyone wants to drop a question in the chat, can be anything, can be about it can be about Warframe, can be about the channel, can be about me, my personal life, etc. Don't worry about your question. If I think something's too personal to answer, I just won't answer it. Simple as that. We've got plenty of time. I am going to bring up the live chat on my phone as well. Sometimes YouTube's backend systems are not good at showing everything. Let me see. Let me see if I can't think of something else to do while we wait. Let me pop in the chat here. I think I've thought of something I could do as a side activity while we wait for some questions to come in. But let's post a chat. Feel free to interrupt me to ask a question. Questions take priority. We'll leave that there and pin it so that people coming in are able to read it. And I think I will go ahead and let's do a let's read of my second book, the very short one, Ludolectic, The Gospel of Game Literacy. We will go ahead and do a read through of this so that the people who just want to lurk and hang out for others can do so. Good evening, Francisco. Welcome. If you would like to be the first questioner, Francisco, please do. I have the chat up on my phone as well. But yeah, this is intended to be an Ask Me Anything. It'll be whatever it needs to be, either way. We'll see. All right, so Ludolectic, The Gospel of Game Literacy. Before you read, all entertainment media outside of gaming comes with the luxury of having a passive primary engagement. As such, any person with eyes or to see or ears to hear can gain some immediate benefit from the art. The primary engagement with the video game is not only active but interactive with the game itself and other people. The result is that the hobby of gaming contains an intrinsic barrier to entry. Actually, I think I just thought of a better way that I can do this. I'm going to pull the window down and have the windows side by side. Here we go. Much better. And then I don't have to look at myself. That'll be nice. All right. To play a game requires a certain level of skill, a level of familiarity with a controller, be that mouse, arcade stick, or other. Oh, Francisco, you were going to ask about how is the new book to be released. The new book is pretty good. I could actually read an excerpt from the new book. Hello, Krypton. Welcome, Krypton. Let me explain the new book. So the new book is different than my previous two, where the first book was my attempt to explain how I look at and review games as an inherently philosophical medium, whereas that was Controller Revolution, Why Video Games Are the Future of Philosophy. And the second book, Ludolectic, The Gospel of Gaming Literacy, was all about trying to create a way to understand the limits and the barriers for onboarding non-gamers into gamers with a more advisory, a field guide kind of vibe to it. Is a very short book that was meant to get people to be able to use it to help understand how to suggest and how to onboard non-gamers into the hobby. This book is different. It is a very personal memoir about my time playing both the games Steel Rising and the game Lies of P, pretty much back to back, and sort of the headspace I was in throughout the entire year that I was playing these games. So it's called All Puppets Are Bastards, Liberty and Labor in the Age of AI. This is not a work of video game philosophy like I would call the other two, but it is very much a book about philosophy, politics, history, but it is also very much centered in the kind of way that you would expect a long-form lore video about a game to be, only written as a book, because it is expressing the story of the games, but taking frequent pauses to explain to the reader what's the historical and philosophical significance of everything that's happening in both of the games, so that it can be appreciated from a more historical point of view. So I can actually I'll read a part of the first section, but I don't want to give Don't want to give the whole goose away on this stream. That would take hours because it is a 240-page long book. And that may not seem like a lot, depending on if you're an avid reader, but it is. It was a lot of research as well. I have quite a long works cited for this. But anyways, chapter 1 is called Steel Rising. Quote, "It seems reasonable, since art copies nature and man can make various automata which move without thought, that nature should produce its own automata much more splendid than the artificial ones. These natural automata are the animals." René Descartes, Letter to More of 5th February, 1649. I'm also going to bring this down so that I can see the chat better. I have been a fan of precision action games ever since I first played Bloodborne in 2016 while recovering from my year of living in downtown Los Angeles post-university. I have written on Bloodborne from so many angles and keep returning to it whenever I discuss the very idea of a Souls-like video game. In this year of 2024, I have been making it a point to catch up to all of those non-From Software games within the genre. 2 games topped the list of my most anticipated Souls-likes releasing in recent years, and both released without me taking the time to experience them in their time: Steel Rising and Lies of P. Now, having played them, each of these games have, one after another, become my favorite precision action game, and for radically different, incomparable reasons. Right now, I'm going to take myself to task and force myself to compare them. For Steel Rising, it was the fact that it was made by Spider's Game Studio. I have been a fan of theirs ever since playing and loving Greedfall, and Lies of P intrigued me by the pure audacity of the acronym APAB emblazoned boldly in the game's original trailer. My intrigue even further solidified when reviews, Let's Players, and my mutuals confirmed the unmitigated savoir-faire of the gameplay. As I played these games one after another, I couldn't help but feel that they were each inspired by the same themes and aesthetics taken from Bloodborne. Not just that particular flavor of European colonialist fashion and architecture, but a specific on-the-nose motif of dolls, puppets, automatons, and robots, as well as what these things mean to life, death, politics, and how we understand human nature. To create a doll or to create a puppet of any kind is to make an assertion on the value of human life. It is something humanity has done for so long and so impulsively that we hardly ever stop to truly examine what that assertion is. We enter into the sewing of a doll or the carving of a puppet thinking that we are creating a toy, a thing of entertainment. So why then did we keep making them beyond playtime? To begin explaining myself, I want to start by telling you my strange experience and complete turnaround while playing Steel Rising. Imagine my surprise when I boot up Steel Rising and the first thing that I am greeted to is Marie Antoinette panicking over the king's inexplicable decision to lock her away, separate her from her children, and invade the city of Paris with an army of clockwork soldiers. Before this opening cutscene played, as I tend to do given the option, I chose to make my character, the automat called Aegis, have the appearance of a black woman. I wavered between choosing the gold or bronze metal filigree, but ultimately chose the porcelain, because I found the contrast appealing and it matched with the aesthetics of the game's marketing. And seeing the dynamic between the Aegis that I created, taking explicit orders from the Queen, being described as devoted to the Queen, being a servant to the Queen, I felt as though I had made a bit of a mistake. You see, no figure in French political history has been as mythologized as Marie Antoinette, none more hated and more defended as a result of her position as queen during the French Revolution. Marie Antoinette has become more of a symbol and a metaphor than a historical figure in the minds of people the world over. She represents to liberals the epitome of the callous detachment of royalty to the plight of the common man. To conservatives and fascists, she is a symbol of virtuous rulership and compassion being unjustly deposed by the ignorant, immoral actors in society. To leftists, she is seen as an irrelevant presence in the political landscape when compared against the economic conflicts between traditional feudalist power held by nobles and the blossoming power of nouveau riche land-owning merchants that controlled the colonies through slavery. If we take a feminist lens, we can see the dynamic of sexism as a tool to inspire revolution by scapegoating a woman as the symbol of noble excess, despite having no formal control over the affairs of state, as was the case with King Louis XVI. Even today, you can find an inexhaustible number of debates discussing what Marie Antoinette really meant when she said, "Let them eat cake." Was this an out-of-touch dismissal of starving masses? A practical suggestion to alleviate hunger due to cake recipes requiring the use of proportionally less flour? Well, it was neither. Marie Antoinette is not the origin of the quote. It was in fact the philosopher Jean-Jacques Rousseau, a pre-Enlightenment philosopher and intellectual inspiration for the National Assembly of France's Third Estate, writing in his autobiography titled Confessions in 1765, in which he wrote at length about his social experiences, frequently mentioning moments of embarrassment. Confessions was one of history's first formal autobiographies as a genre, and deeply influential on the development of personal nonfiction essays, like the one you're reading now. All of these minute notions swirled in my head as I watched Aegis interacting with Marie Antoinette in the opening cutscene. The first mission she gives us is to find the whereabouts of her son, the Dauphin. My uneasiness aside, I was still excited to get into the game. Having just finished Mortal Shell not a week prior, playing Steel Rising felt far too fast. I felt a stiffness as both my character and the enemies would suddenly jerk from one animation to another with little to no anticipation or transition between. I think I'm going to leave my preview read of the new book there, because that's 6 pages in to what is otherwise a 240-page book. And I would say that the transition from Steel Rising to just starting the discussion of Lies of P is about halfway through. But yeah, hope you enjoyed that. What do we think, everyone? Did you enjoy me narrating one of my books live on stream? I don't mean to be too captivating. Sorry if I've left you all in dumbfounded silence, awe, and fascination. I'm kidding, by the way. I don't actually think that highly of myself. I just find joking about how cool I am easier than self-deprecating humor. Not very good at self-deprecation. Not my style. Yeah. Let's see. Currently, the video is sitting at 1,002,571 views, which is pretty amazing. We hit 1 million last weekend, and I didn't know if I was going to jump right onto stream right then, but I decided to schedule it out and wait instead. Thank you, Francisco. I actually don't know when I'm going to release the book, but I do know that the book is going to be released this year. Sometime this year, maybe around the holidays, as I'm exploring some options. I don't necessarily want to just self-publish the book like I've done with the other two, but I probably will end up doing that if the feelers, if the other prospects I've sent out don't really come back with anything positive to say. Unfortunately, when you are, like me, not published by a traditional publisher yet, the first published book is really hard, because you basically, like with social media, you kind of have to establish that you already have a fan base who will purchase the book. Else publishers want to end up charging the author for every print, for the even the act of publication itself, which is as simple as getting a serial number assigned to your book. Amazon does that for free. You can get a I forget the acronym. There's a letter acronym for what kind of number it is, but you can get your number for your book just random, just easily generated on certain websites. So unfortunately, I've had to dodge a few attempts at scam services that mainly just want you to pay for all of your own publishing and printing and then attempt to sell the book yourself. Why do that when Amazon Kindle Direct Publishing is available? Now, unfortunately, like many things, you have to earn your fame and your followers before your career can begin nowadays. All right. Let's see. Well, I guess we can go back to Ludolectic. Where were we? I think I was somewhere in the middle of just this very second paragraph. Right. See. Oh yeah, Francisco. What kind of art do you make, Francisco? Are you an illustrator? Are you music, comics, painting? Being an illustrator or a traditional, an analog medium illustrator nowadays seems really rough, because your avenues are really like street art. Some coffee shops allow people to sell their art by hanging them on the walls of coffee shops. And my local library has a place for local artists to hang their artwork. I don't know if many local libraries do that, but I saw that and that was pretty cool. No one was taking advantage of it. Let's see. Anyways. Let's go back to Ludolectic and see how that goes. All right, I'll just start again from the second paragraph. To play a game requires a certain level of skill, a level of familiarity with a controller, be that mouse, arcade stick, or other, a base understanding of programming and the nature of inputs and outputs in computing. Beyond this basic level of skill, the video game industry, though young, has had decades to develop, adapt, and evolve progressively more complex controls. It has evolved a shared jargon and lexicon, a series. Oh, you write poems, for instance. Yeah, I'm going to cut mid-sentence for the other listeners. You write poems. Oh yeah, music software is really hard. I did some of that for the Warframe music videos I did in recent lore videos, and it was really haphazard the way I was doing it. I was basically just trying to scramble together little things that I know. But yeah, learning music software from scratch by yourself is very hard, because I have not found good sources that explain it. So you basically just have to go in it yourself and mess with everything until you understand how it works. And even then, like half of the things that I clicked on with the one that I was using looked like they did nothing. I could barely even figure out how to get certain tracks to play MIDI files, or how to assign whoops, kicked my desk. Sorry about that. Or how to assign like a digital instrument to play a MIDI file. Poems, if I think about how do people approach being a poet nowadays, I think it's mainly in the form of making submissions to online communities or to existing magazines, as well as being very bullish about how you identify and pursue writing poems for poetry contests around whatever country you're in. I think those are the main avenues I see people using for poetry. But then, of course, there's also um, doing poetry in short form video content, in social video, which requires knowing about audio and video editing, setting background music, and interesting visuals to your poetry reading. Yeah, there's some possibility. It's not impossible. You don't have to do it all through just garnering uh, attention through social media, but it can be pretty hard still, especially for poets, to get a foot in anywhere without having that fame to really grease some hinges, open some doors. Yes. Okay. Back to reading. Uh, Beyond this basic level of skill, the video game industry, though young, has had decades to develop, adapt, and evolve progressively more complex controls. It has evolved a shared jargon and lexicon, a series of visual languages that are more efficiently communicating to people already familiar with their genres. Yet, even with these clearly defined barriers to entry, lovers of games who attempt to share the things they love are met with surprisingly greater difficulty than they expect. Despite game developers' attempts to build intuitive tutorials into games, by and large, they have, in my opinion, failed. They fail because without realizing it, they assume the new players are experienced players. Though I suppose that entirely depends on at whom the developers aim as their audience. In my last work on the nature of video games, Controller Revolution: Why Video Games Are the Future of Philosophy, we explored the unique shared qualities between philosophical communities and engagement with video games. The work discussed debates on the nature of art and established a rational framework for evaluating games as a work of philosophy. However, if most people do not grow up with games, if a generational gap persists, we cannot hope to communicate with one another through this uniquely philosophical art form. Think of ludolectic as an important pragmatic supplement to my other works theory. I am a firm believer in taking multiple analytic frameworks to better understand the full scope of an art form. In ludolectic, we will take a historical and pragmatic approach to the video game industry, the people who play games, and the people who do not. Through this analysis, the book will establish both the barriers that prevent someone from joining the audience of game enthusiasts, as well as a roadmap for overcoming these barriers. This is not a formal historical text nor dramatized nonfiction. The history of the video game art medium is only highlighted where it is relevant to the main topic: how one learns to understand the language of games and why a gap of understanding exists. This will be followed by a delineation of some conceptual skills that are either necessary for games or a hindrance to games. Finally, our roadmap for how to become a ludolegere, a gaming literate person, will focus on broad principles over specific games. While we all have our favorite games, not all games apply to all interests, which leads us to the first principle that will guide this entire book. If you want to be understood, then you must speak the other's language. No one is required nor can be forced to care about us or the things we care about. Interested is interesting. To be heard, you must first listen. There are many infinite number of ways for me to write those words ad nauseum. As a reader of this book, you have at one point had the goal to bring someone into the medium of games in order to share with them a piece of yourself. This book is not about that, but about the step prior to that desire. This is about overcoming and predicting that person's needs, understanding their values, and connecting them to games that meet both their needs and their values. By understanding this first principle, we can begin to realize that our goal is not to share a game so that others do not miss out, but to share our experiences with people we care about. Chapter 1: Exodus, Death of the Gaming Industry. In the latter half of the 1970s, video games had become a wildfire business. The high-end luxury of digital entertainment was taking off in the form of arcade cabinets, home consoles, and personal computers. People who did not have the means to purchase these games for themselves would flock to any local business that hosted games, and everyone of every demographic was taking a look. In Japan, arcade cabinets were becoming a staple for storefronts of candy shops. In the United States, Pong and Pac-Man were appearing in local gas stations, bars, and pool halls. Adult women had become such a major demographic for games that Pac-Man's sequel, Miss Pac-Man, was directly marketed to women rather than the whole family. Video games, given where they were typically played, even started taking on an unsavory reputation as being too adult, spurring Atari co-founder Nolan Bushnell to create Chuck E. Cheese's, the kid-friendly pizza parlor and arcade that became the favorite hotspot for birthday parties in the late 1980s and 1990s. In 1976, Warner Communications acquired Atari. Over the next few years, Atari's sales would account for 1/3 of Warner Communications' annual profits, and Atari became the fastest growing US company in the country's history to date. It was not until 1982 that this bubbling industry would experience a catastrophic pop. In 1979, 4 programmers left Atari in part due to disputes of credits on games. These programmers wanted the right to put their names on the things they created, just the same as Warner Communications did with music and movies. Proper and public-facing accreditation of the game developers behind studios and publishers is still a hotly debated subject in the game industry today. Together, these programmers formed the software company Activision. They began developing third-party titles for the Atari 2600. Copying Activision's model, dozens of inexperienced third-party developers formed in 1982, and by December of that year, approximately 100 companies rushed around 400 games, low-quality shovelware, to department store shelves for the holiday season. In 1982 also saw a price war in gaming home computers between the Commodore 64 and Texas Instruments 99-4A, which began targeting the game console industry in marketing campaigns for high prices and lower quality games. Personal computers, on the other hand, offered cheaper hardware prices, more complex games enabled by the ability to create save files, and useful features outside of gaming. Home console sales plummeted over 1983 and the years that followed. A $3.2 billion industry shrank to a $100 million industry, and a 97% loss far exceeding anything, a 97% loss far exceeding anything market analysts could have predicted. The Warner acquisition may have started the butterfly effect that caused the Atari shock, a colloquial name in Japan for the video game crash of 1983 in the United States. The ripples of losses in home console gaming buffeted against PC gaming and arcades as well. All right, so that was a lot. I am very much not used to, or I guess I could say the way I've started writing nowadays is a little bit smoother than this. This is a lot of very direct fact to fact kind of writing and not a lot of transition. This is kind of how I was taught to write when I was learning my skills of writing primarily from my philosophy classes, writing philosophy papers and essays, where they kind of intentionally teach you to be more direct, to stop using flowery language, to be as bare bones and straightforward as possible with the idea that you're arguing for, in order to stay in line with philosophy academic standards, so that your idea can be directly critiqued rather than you trying to create how your idea feels. And whereas I understand that perspective from the perspective of doing the work of academic philosophy, not being able to connect to the feelings that an idea creates really hinders philosophy communication with the general public. It's kind of a response to how science is more of a prevalent field of study than philosophy in society as a whole. Scientific writing is that dry, is that direct, and goes from fact to fact. Whereas if you look at how popular philosophers wrote, even throughout the 20th century, flowery language was very much the norm. Poetry and expressive prose was a huge part of how people were writing about philosophy. But it also wasn't the only part. People would also be very descriptive and direct, and also very illustrative at the same time. And I feel as though now we're in a place where, or for a few years, for like a couple decades or so, we were in a place where philosophy writing was trying to be scientific writing in terms of style. And I think because of that, philosophy lost a huge amount of ground to self-help style writing, which purports itself to be scientific, but writes more emotional, poetic, and explorative more religiously than anything in the field of science would write. And so now that philosophy is getting back into the habit of, at least with public-facing philosophy, being able to talk about the human element and talk about philosophy in a beautiful way, it's kind of also then now making philosophy and philosophy writing to be compared part and parcel to self-help writing. And the point of philosophical writing is not really to make people feel empowered, strong, good, or proactive, which really is the point of self-help. It is to encourage the reader to take some sort of action. A person seeks a self-help book because they are looking to be encouraged or inspired, whereas a person should probably pick up a philosophy book in the interest of wanting to see some person's perspective on something, as opposed to seeking an answer for something. Yeah, and I think that's a much harder sell. It's a much harder sell to say you'll get to hear about someone's opinion for a long time, and it will probably be very thought out, as opposed to this book is going to inspire you to become the best possible version of you. Yeah, it's not exactly the same. Nothing against the self-help industry, nothing against self-help as as a genre of writing. It's just, we're kind of in a weird spot where now that philosophy is trying to make a comeback in terms of its prose, being compared to self-help more than any other genre, which I find a little odd. I never would have thought that's how it was going to go. Anyways, now that I've rested my my reading voice a little bit, Francisco, another question. Could philosophy encourage people to know science? I think very much so. To give a little bit of an example, philosophers are absolutely obsessed with wanting to hear the latest bit of information about quantum physics. Particularly, they're extremely interested in trying to know more about what it physically means for the fundamental particles of the universe to be probabilistic waveforms. And it encourages a lot of writing in the field of ontology, basically philosophizing about the physical world and how it's constructed, in order to try to inspire new questions to be asked, new tests to be done, and more science to be done to figure out the next hypothesis that's going to promote more science. I think there's a lot of interaction between philosophy and science overall. And I think scientists often, when they're trying to think of the next question they want to ask with the next study they want to do, I think oftentimes scientists don't realize that they are, in fact, engaging with a thought philosophically before they then set up their experimentation, their studies, their proposals. And I think that the ones who do realize that the step of the scientific process, which is hypothesis, is philosophically founded, come up with better questions to then test. I think it's something we take for granted now that there is a divide between science and philosophy, but we kind of also have to remember that historically, science is an invention of philosophy as a practice. The development of the scientific method took place over, some could say hundreds, others could say thousands of years, going as far back to the Greek atomists and materialists. There are debates about those notions in other cultures, not just in the Greek tradition, trying to establish what it means to know something at all. And so the interaction between philosophy's disciplines of ontology, studying and thinking about the world, and epistemology, studying and thinking about what it means to know things and how to know things, created all of the different schools of thought that interacted and eventually became science. I think that being a philosopher, when you stick with it for long enough, when you get over that part of every young philosopher's desire to solve the world and answer everyone's questions for them, when you get past that stage of your development as a philosopher, you start being more general about your approach, more about, I'm going to play with ideas, I'm going to experiment with ideas, and I'm going to see what ideas I can learn about and what comes out if I apply an idea to a certain situation, being non-dogmatic about all of it. The very idea of skepticism was a school of epistemology, and the foundation of skepticism is not doubt, as people like to say. They like to hold doubt as the highest virtue, and in so doing, a lot of people end up taking that to mean just doubt the mainstream, and then anything alternative be absolutely devoted to proving no matter what, so that you can counter mainstream narratives. But in actuality, skepticism as a school of thought was all about resisting dogma, resisting being devoted to an idea as a fundamental uh, definition of yourself. To see yourself as not determined, your own value is not determined by what ideas you believe in at any given time. There's a movie called Dogma, I think, that literally is about being non-dogmatic about Christianity, uh, starring Chris Rock, I think. It's a great movie. It's a really good movie for explaining what a skeptical worldview is, which is just being non-dogmatic about beliefs, being open to discussion, but also not being a wet blanket and not becoming a zealous champion for the wrong thing, you know? All right. Or for any mainstream or counterculture, to be open to listening and exploring ideas with everyone, but not being a wet blanket. Yeah, that was a great question, Francisco. Thank you so much. You're full of great questions tonight, and I appreciate it a lot. I'm happy to stick around for as long as we're still getting a few more questions. I don't know how much more I want to keep reading my book, because it's actually taking a little bit of a toll on my voice. Yeah, the rest of this section of Ludolectic is just a short summary of how the Atari shock sort of set the stage for the American economy, for home consoles at least in the American video gaming industry, to disappear from the equation for a time, leading to the dominance of personal computers for gaming in the United States. And then the chapter after it is about how Nintendo entered the industry thereafter. Yeah, I don't think I'll keep reading that because it was taking its toll. I have not actually been playing all that much Warframe recently. I actually spent my morning defeating the final boss of Ender Magnolia. I played Ender Lilies a long time ago, and I played it on my Switch. And I loved that game. And it was a game that I really wanted to figure out a way to talk about, because I really loved how it was a narrative about sacrifice, how it was a narrative that presented sacrifice as like a virtuous and heroic thing to do, personal self-sacrifice, I mean. But at the same time, it recognized that the toll that it took on the person making the sacrifice was an injustice, that it was unfair to create that expectation, and that the reason the sacrifice had to be made was due to this thing called the Blight, which made people immortal and resulted in all the bad things that happened in the setting. People wanted to do a magic, become immortal, and solve all the world's problems. Dark Souls style, they live forever, they go mad, and then you have a world of chaos and violence, which the main character has to solve. Ender Magnolia is coming right off the heels on that, and it's a very different kind of story in that it doesn't assume that you've played the prior game, but it would really help if you did, because eventually it does get into that the Blight exists, that it is made of magic and that something has to be done about that by the end of the game. I'm not going to spoil the end of the game, but the very last scene of Ender Magnolia kind of is just the response to, the answer to the story of Ender Lilies. And it doesn't really go into much of that narrative dynamic from the first game or establish a new narrative dynamic until you reach the very end and kind of make a decision as to what to do about all the stuff that's happened to make the setting blow up. That's happened to make the setting blow up. It was a much better game, in my opinion. It was heavier, it was more precise. It was definitely a bit easier to play most of the time, probably because I was playing on my PlayStation and not on the Switch, and I had a better controller. I kind of miss how in Ender Lilies you had so many more different characters, spirits, whatever, to help you choose and make your build for how to play. Whereas in Ender Magnolia, it was much more controlled. You had a much smaller number of what they're called homunculi, robots, more robot narratives. I've done enough of those. I don't need to get into robots. I have a whole book about robot narratives coming out this year, sometime in the future, which I don't know what time that's going to be. But yeah, I think that was a better choice in terms of creating a solid action game, but it also meant that you can't really go as hard into a single style of playing. Like with Ender Lilies, you could easily create a gameplay style where you were doing all melee attacks, counters, like being really up in a person's face. And you could also drop all of that, even your primary attack, to just use autonomous, continuous abilities. And so you could just focus on dodging. With Ender Magnolia, you really do need like a primary melee weapon. And for a lot of the bosses, I found that I needed the ability to use the one homunculi that allows you to parry and counterattack. You can just unlock a basic parry through your equipment that will work no matter what. But in terms of getting the timing down, having enough parry windows to make parrying viable, I still needed to have the homunculi equipped too, because you couldn't just parry, parry, parry. Parrying also came with a window of vulnerability after the parry, and if there's another attack in that window, you get hit. So you need more than one kind of parry. Yeah. So it ended up being this thing where you had to choose a well-balanced build in order to overcome most challenges, because you couldn't just make a build that focused on one thing to the expense of others, because the different abilities don't overlap. Continuous abilities stop when you use a regular attack. Autonomous abilities have limited range or were fairly underpowered, fairly weak, and there also weren't many of them that you could use at once, or they would be conditional upon a different action that you were taking. So I think that the combat in Ender Magnolia was definitely better in terms of its precision and its craft. I do miss the flexibility, the floatiness, the weirdness that was inherent to Ender Lilies, that made it like just the polar opposite of Blasphemous in every way. I love that Ender Lilies was a pure opposite to Blasphemous, and I loved Blasphemous too. I loved Blasphemous as well. I have not played Blasphemous 2. But yeah, Ender Lilies, not replaced by Ender Magnolia. Two pretty distinct experiences, both very much worth your time. I know no one asked, but yeah, I said it. All right. All right, folks. So I have been streaming for about an hour. I am not a streamer. My voice is tired. But I still want to be available to answer questions in case anyone wants to ask them. I'm going to chill out. Well, I'm going to go and get some water because I need to drink some water because my throat is dry. I will come back in, it'll take like 30 seconds. It'll take like 30 seconds for me to get some water. Hope to see some questions in the chat when I come back. If there's not, I'll hang out for like another 10 minutes or so. See what questions come in. I'll answer them. And if not, we'll call it an evening. But I will stick around here for as long as y'all keep me around with the topics you give me to talk about. Be right back. All right, I've returned. Continue with some nonsense this past week. Not going to get into it here. I've been dealing with a lot of nonsense. But we good. It's the weekend. Most of the nonsense work related, some of the nonsense internet related. It's how it be. Cool. All right, that is handled. Okay. So, the flesh that hates 001, what happened with the Discord server? So, that is a story from a long time ago now, and I'm currently in the works of trying to figure out how to go about doing that responsibly again in the future. But essentially what happened with the last Discord server that I attempted way back before. For one, I was a much smaller YouTuber than I am now. I had maybe a few hundred subscribers. Not even 1,000 subscribers, I don't think. Maybe 1,000 when I had that Discord server up. I did not have a lot of time to be participating in that Discord server, to moderate it or oversee it, because I was working 12 hours a day, driving for Lyft and Uber full time. Amongst the people that were in that server, there were some people who were fans of mine, but also there were people who were just friends of the people who were my fans that I thought, sure, why not bring them in here? It'd be fine for lively communication. What it became was that the people in the server got very proactive about advocating for for illegal and violent activity. And I did not want my server to be dominated as a space by people who would make the conversation be about taking violent action against people with different political beliefs. I may be a person who has very intense political beliefs, and I'm not afraid about putting my beliefs in my videos and saying what I think is wrong, what I think is right, etc., etc. I very much believe in free speech, but I also believe that the remedy to bad speech is more speech. And above all, I don't believe in the use of political power or government or militias to regulate speech. And so because I lacked the ability to moderate even a small Discord server by myself, I just closed it. I took it down because I wasn't comfortable with how people were using the space I had created in order to have it be a space for their coordination separate from their own accounts. I didn't want to be used in that way when I wanted to create a space for the exploration and discussion of philosophy in video games. The people who had joined early on made it to be a space about advocating for violent action in response to political disagreement. So I took it down. I have always wanted to have a Discord server and to make it a regular part of what I do with my channel and to build a community of like-minded people to be able to talk and gather together and share a love of video games for each other, to try to keep it lighthearted, even though philosophy can take on some very serious subjects. In fact, it should. I still want people to remember that the idea of teaching philosophy and demonstrating ideas through games is what matters most to me and what I want the community to be about. And I couldn't really do anything to make sure that happened back then. So it scared me. I know I have a lot of other content creator friends now, and among those friends, a lot of them have Discord servers that have really thriving, pretty niche communities that aren't weird about the stuff. But I kind of realized that as a person who talks about philosophy, and in particular, am also willing to talk about political philosophy, I've realized that I also will attract people who don't know the difference between discussing political philosophy and just acting out their politics, if you get what I mean. I don't have a super clear way to explain that, but the difference between sportsmanship and gamesmanship. When people say politics, they mean, or when people say they don't like politics, what they mean is they don't like gamesmanship. Having sportsmanship while discussing political philosophy is my bread and butter, is my ideal. And I wish that would be the base. But yeah, I need to be able to have good moderators who are ready to support the space, who have my back and understand the mission, before I can reasonably put that out as something I want to try again. Because it was very startling for me to start seeing people I don't recognize and people who do not follow my stuff in my space discussing very specific or wanting to start coordinating specific violent action. I was like, this is going to go too far, way too fast. had to cut it, had to nip it in the bud. It sucked. I was having a great time right up until a situation that I couldn't handle happened. But yeah, someday. I think the Kingdom Come to Deliverance. I think the Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 situation is weird. I think it's just very weird. I really also wanted to do a video about Kingdom Come Deliverance 1 because I happened to be learning about Hildegard of Bingen at the same time that that game was coming out. I think that the developer, I don't know his name, but that head developer, he does not social media well. I think he's very easy to misunderstand. And I think in terms of like those, chud gamers, outrage grifters, gamergate types, they will latch on to anything, and they will make anything their champion or their devil in a matter of hours, in a matter of days. Look at what happened with Stellar Blade. Hours between whether or not it was the best game ever versus the wokest, mobist, whatever they want to say. I think that to recognize that gay people existed in medieval times is fine. It's good. It was a good story. It's a good game. It was doing what it needed to be. And I think that when you have, unfortunately, it is true that you will be judged by the company you keep. Lots of people thought that Kingdom Come Deliverance was one of those hyper conservative games because of its era, because the person making it cares about historical accuracy, even if it means expressing historical bigotry, or perspectives that wouldn't match our perspectives of the time. People like to claim that they are the champion of what historical perspectives are when they are in fact acting just purely politically. I have had to walk that line myself. Dan Vavra, yeah, okay. Dan is pretty bad at coming across in social media posts. I think he's very direct. I think he says things without providing context. I think it would take far too much work for him to be able to provide all the context the masses demand. He makes games. He likes a particular era of history. I actually don't know if he is a he. I don't know his pronouns. I'm guessing. My apologies if I'm wrong. But yeah, I also don't think that I don't think you should look at Kingdom Come to Deliverance as a champion of queer space either. I think that if you're looking for that game to be the champion of a political perspective in either direction, you're not going to find it. I think that gay romance was a good story told in a time where gay people existed, which is always has been around. So I gotta turn on the light. I'm losing my light. But yeah, I don't think that that game is a purposefully political space in either way. I think it is an honest and meticulous historical recreation for the sake of having a very cool Western RPG. That would be my general opinion on how the narrative around Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 has changed. And quite admittedly, when that narrative was around and changing, I didn't talk about it at all. I stayed as far away from it as possible. The only thing I knew about Kingdom Come Deliverance was that it was a cool looking game. I watched streamers play it. Lots of the Let's Players that I like loved it. And the second one was looking cool too. I think it's a good game. I think it's a well-made game. Oh, more light. That's a bit better. All right. Taking more questions, whoever has them. To let you know, I am about halfway through my water. If my water runs out and I cannot speak anymore, I will go. And we'll call it a stream then. But I appreciate everyone coming in. I appreciate some more of these questions coming in. Yeah. I'm also happy to take a break from my voice, quite honestly. Bringing it down a little bit. Oh, that's cool. Sorry, I'm browsing Blue Sky, just seeing someone colored their Jade Warframe to look like Nirvash from Eureka 7. That's awesome. Eureka 7's my favorite anime. Hmm. Whew. Okay. Down. Let's see. With the recent release of Expedition 33, there is a new debate of people wanting Final Fantasy to learn from it, as well as Baldur's Gate 3 and Metaphor ReFantasio to go back to turn-based. What's your opinion on that? Baldur's Gate 3 was I forget what the CRPGs call it. They call it real time with pause, wasn't it? It wasn't actually real time action. It was real time with pause. Final Fantasy, I think Final Fantasy had been moving away from turn-based as their preferred style for a very long time. But Final Fantasy 13 was exclusively turn-based. 13, 13.2, and 13.3 all used Lightning Returns, all used the active time battle system for turn-based combat that got popularized. Well, it was I think it was Final Fantasy VI, and then Final Fantasy VII did it, and that just sold active time battle turn-based. Baldur's Gate 3 had only turn-based combat. Okay, thank you, Joel. And Metaphor had turn-based. Oh, okay, I see what you're saying. Baldur's Gate 3, Metaphor, and now Clair Obscur all have the turn-based, and we're talking about other action RPGs going back to turn-based systems. Here's what I'll say. I don't know about Baldur's Gate 3. Metaphor had a lot in it for manipulating the turn-basedness, as well as Expedition 33. It's turn-based, but more like Mario RPG, there is a lot of inter-turn interactions that that one participates in, dodging and parrying and jumping. I believe the director of the game said that it was a very direct inspiration of Sekiro, that they were trying to make it feel like Sekiro Shadows Die Twice. I think part of what we're seeing is that when turn-based games are taking inspiration from action games or from other systems to expand and do something more more dynamic with the turn-based system, we like them very much. That said, I don't think at all that the existence of a very good turn-based system invalidates that an action game is a different kind of appeal that is still interesting and still valuable to have. I haven't played Final Fantasy 16 yet. I do want to, because I love character action games a lot. And a character action game with Final Fantasy's sensibilities is something that I've actually kind of already experienced. We have had games like that already with Crisis Core on the PSP, with people didn't like it, but Final Fantasy Zero, I played the HD of Zero for a little bit. And that game was almost kind of like Three Houses, Fire Emblem Three Houses. I would think it would be a travesty to try to do away with action games because turn-based action games are taking more inspiration from other sources and having a revival. We are currently in the revival of turn-based action games. We have, in fact, gone back already. I don't know how much more you can go back now than to say that action games as a genre shouldn't be doing things or trying new things or existing. Oh, that's okay, Joel. You take care of those kids. Kids are more important than my stream, obviously. Yeah, but thank you for dropping in. I appreciate it. Yes, okay. But I suppose that is my final word on the idea. I think that it would be a travesty to try to tie the hands of a developer or a team that has an interesting idea for a genre of game that they want to try to execute on, just because right now there are very good examples of one kind of game doing new things. I don't believe that Final Fantasy will never do a turn-based game again. But if Square Enix, if Sony, if they don't have a new idea, if they don't have an interesting, specific idea that they want to try for a turn-based game, don't tell them that they should go back to that. You would get a turn-based game that sucks, that wouldn't be like Baldur's Gate 3, Metaphor, or Expedition 33. Expedition 33 clearly is more based on Atlas turn-based RPGs on the Persona series, and taking inspiration from an action RPG from FromSoft, from. That's really I can't say that. From FromSoft. There we go. From. Oh Lord. I got legit tongue-tied trying to say that. But yeah, Expedition 33 isn't taking its primary inspiration from Final Fantasy. Why should Final Fantasy action games become Expedition 33? No reason. No reason for that. Let them make their games. Let them make the games they are inspired to make. Let them make the games that they feel they can make well. That's more important. All right. Svev, question. In today's age, everything that is said by employees is taken as truth, and most time adds toxicity. Will time return to where fans will separate company and employees as different entities? So let's start here. Why are the words of employees taken as truth over the words of a corporation? It is because, generally speaking, a corporation is not incentivized to be direct, open, and honest. Its motivation is to be stable, to create immediate profit, and to promote the sale of a new product. There is not a good a priori reason to just believe a company. It's not malicious to not believe a company. It may become malicious for people who have been burned by a company multiple times on a thing they thought they would like. But like, if you love Nintendo and you want a Nintendo game, and you can pre-order a Nintendo game because Nintendo said this Nintendo game is going to be the best Nintendo game that ever Nintendo. I'm still going to tell you, hey, don't pre-order it. Let it come out. See if it's something you want to play then, and then buy it. Because Nintendo is going to say it's great. If an employee says, Nintendo sucks internally, I'm willing to believe them. When's the last time you knew of an employer that didn't suck to work for? Now, specifically, what kind of suck that is, it's a case-by-case basis. I think people are more likely to believe a person who is an employee of a company because an employee is a person first. And people want to believe other people. They want to extend that goodwill. Some people don't. Some people want to extend hate and doubt. But a person who doesn't have a motive one way or another is going to prioritize believing the honest speech of another person than they are of what they know is an ad. That doesn't mean that an employee is never going to be bearing false witness. I think that goes a bit towards the thing I was saying earlier about being non-dogmatic. Don't just champion an employee because they made a Twitter post. It's a reason to go, okay, hold on. I'm going to take a step back now. I'm going to watch. I'm going to see what comes out. It's an opportunity to stop and be patient and think about something, not an opportunity to go on the attack. I think the internet has a lot of toxic spaces. I think that we forget that the average person is not engaging in those spaces and not being a part of that dialogue. And so I wouldn't be too worried that people as a whole are being too reactive or being too dogmatic. I would say that those situations happen. It's the internet. It's going to continue being that way because that's just how the internet facilitates communication. I don't think it's going to change into a world where we trust what a company says, because I don't think you should. I think you should realize the company is engaging in motivated speech, and a person that is speaking for themselves may or may not be engaged in motivated speech. Case-by-case basis. Next, Joel, do you consider it disingenuous or fraudulent to base your real-life philosophy off of these stories inside of a game? I felt for some time that the only path forward in human growth was genuine human connection. It seems like Warframe is thinking along the same lines. So let me say this. Engaging with art is genuine human connection. Engaging with a video game, which is art, is genuine human connection. People are making the game Warframe. They are putting their values, their beliefs, and their experiences into the stories they are telling. And you are experiencing those stories and engaging with those stories with your own values and perspectives. There is an inherent dialogue happening between you and the artists and the developers through the medium of the game. And because you can play it, because you can interact with the story, you have a voice in that conversation. You're not just receiving an idea, you're contributing to an idea. You're interacting with an idea. And so I don't find it disingenuous at all to take a value that you feel or realize or experience from a game, from a piece of art, and incorporate it into your life. I think that is the point of art. I think it is part of what makes the human experience human, that we can communicate our values across time in that way. It's just as valid as reading a book of philosophy and coming to develop a value from that. If you find stoicism or skepticism valuable because you read a book about stoicism or skepticism, that's not disingenuous. That's an honest engagement with art. And I think video games create even more genuine experiences because you can interact with it right away, rather than only having to take that experience into the real world with you and to other human connections in your personal life. You can have that connection in the game, and then you can also take that connection into your personal life. So, no, not disingenuous at all. That is a real and important way to engage with art, and I highly encourage it. Right, next, the flesh that hates. Next question, or maybe just context. Let's see. During the release of Elden Ring, employees for Guerrilla Games, Ubisoft, people took as companies themselves, were criticizing Elden Ring. Oh, yeah, I do vaguely remember that. I do vaguely remember the conversations of some game developers criticizing the Elden Ring UI, and then people went straight into criticizing the other industry standards of UI. I think that was a bit of a hodgepodge. People are going to conflate the critique of a person if they find that person to be representing a game company. I think that's a misunderstanding of the communication, to think that a person who is a part of a company is representing the company. But that is why oftentimes employees have to put in their profiles that the views expressed are not representative of their employer, because people do make that mistake. People think that the cashier at Walmart has an investment in whether or not a person continues shopping at Walmart. They don't, but people think that. So that miscommunication is very common. I think that's just a natural part of reacting too quickly to something. I do think it is valid to have a conversation about design principles when one is critiquing design principles. So long as you're not turning that into ad hominem, that's an extremely valid conversation to have. It's extremely on point for a person from from a part of the industry that has a set of design philosophies, critiquing someone else's design philosophies, it invites critique. And having that critique happen is good. Having it on Twitter, probably not productive. Having it in a conference like GDC, probably extremely productive. Depends on the context. The core feeling is valid. Did you know that the quote about the face-eating leopards was actually tweeted by the lead story writer of Warframe? I didn't know that. Leopards Eating Faces party started with Warframe? That's awesome. I think that fucking rules. Had no idea that was a thing. All right, y'all, keep them coming. I'm at the very end of my water. I've probably 4 or 5 sips left. The water will determine the end of the stream. Hold on. Text from wife. Okay. My wife fed the cats. I have to try to feed the boy again because he doesn't feel like eating because he's all lazy from his shot. He was very bold earlier. He tried to eat the tuna directly off of my plate. My tuna. He normally just sits and waits to see if he would be given a scrap. He's never given any scraps because that's unhealthy for kitties. But he put his nose less than a centimeter away from my tuna and was getting ready. Visits to the vet make that boy bold when he gets home. Being loopy on drugs gets him bold. Do you think the current Warframe lore was has always been planned? No. No, not at all. The current Warframe lore, the current arc we're seeing with 1999, with the Hex, with Whispers in the Wall, no. Not always. The reason I can say that with such confidence is because Warframe is old. It's so old. What, 13, 14 years? What anniversary are we on this TennoCon? Steve did not think that Warframes were going to go back to being human proto-frames at all. He absolutely did not know that that was the direction the story was going to try. Let's see. The 1999 was literally made in Slack chat where Reb said that it would be cool to do 90s. Yeah, like the nature of a live service game is one where different plans coalesce over time to try out and create new ideas. That's not always in story. Since Rebecca took over, the team has had a very consistent schedule in terms of how it deals with its release of story content. Mainly that we have some story content around the release of new Warframes. They try to have a new frame or a relevant release. They try to do a new frame every quarter. They don't actually do a new frame every quarter, but I think they try. They try to have very relevant updates that will like respond to what the community is looking for in terms of gameplay. Over the holiday season, the December release, right around the Game Awards, is pretty much always when they do a big story release. And then there will be like a minor story release around TennoCon. Minor being more or less some size relative to what they are planning for the December release. And then there are gameplay and frame releases in the other 2 quarters of the year. It's very consistent now since Rebecca took over. It's very consistent with content release, some story and content release, and big story and content in December. Hello, Valmath. But yeah, Steve did not know that this is where most of the things in the story were going. I think what Steve had planned out was up through, I forget the story, the quest title now. This is what you are. I think he had planned up through that first interaction between the operator and the Lotus a few years after Warframe got started. I don't think he even had that when Warframe Second Dream. Thank you, Steph. Second Dream. I think he had Second Dream figured out as where the story was going a few years into the game. I think at the start, they just wanted to make the core concept and see if it would stick, see if it would go somewhere. And when it started going somewhere, I think that's when they started thinking about story again. But after Dark Sector, after Grenier got canned, after Hayden Tenno was became a counter-Soviet secret op man. They just wanted the core setting build out. They got to story later. All right. And I miss the days when I could just stack fire, electricity, and what was it? Poison, toxin on a weapon, and cold on a weapon, and just explode in colors. It was a long time ago. All right. The Flesh That Hates. On the recent fever of video game adaptation into movie series, the quality of this adaptations is way more varied than in previous decades. When you heard that there would be a movie based on a popular game IP, people usually universally expected something bad that reeked of corporate meddling and misunderstanding of the source material. But recently said adaptation can range from genuinely. You're still probably typing out the question. To kind of predict your question, I do think adaptation is fine. I don't want adaptation to get in the way of the creation of new IP. And I do agree that there's wildly different quality in terms of how adaptation is going. Loved all seasons of the Castlevania cartoon. The Devil May Cry cartoon hurts my soul deeply. My wife and I had a great night getting drunk and hate watching it and yelling at the screen. It was so much fun, knowing that I wasn't going to like it going in. We had a great time, despite the story being bad. A lot of really strong artistry went into that. I think I'm glad that we're in a situation where adaptation is more flexible. We aren't seeing things getting adapted into games to be shovelware or advertisement for movies. And I think that's for the best. Because we got some great games out of it, but we got mostly schlock. And if we're in the other direction, where we can get some great adaptation series of games in other mediums that tell great stories, great. And if those are mostly shock, not great, but don't put your money to them till you know what they're like. Let's see, Valmath. That's true. Warframe at start was Go Burr. Warframe was Go Burr. Maya Hara, hello. Thank you for dropping in to the stream, Maya Hara. All right, let's see. What's your opinion? Is something good, or it's what's your opinion? Is it something good, or is something lost in adaptation from such different media? There is a lot lost in the adaptation of video game media into other, not primarily interactive media. The way you engage is entirely differently. And, I'm not going to say it's bad to retell the story for people who are not able to play games, who would otherwise be interested in it. But you are experiencing a different kind of story when you experience it in a different medium. I don't think it's bad that they both exist. I think it's important to recognize that these are two different art pieces and they stand alone. They do not determine the quality of the other. Let's see, book, etc. Which books? Pretty much different from both. Agreed, but you have some. I actually never engaged with Rings of Power. I used to be more into Tolkien stuff and Tolkien adjacent things. Fantasy as a genre in general can't really escape being Tolkien adjacent. No, I guess I don't really have anything to say about Rings of Power. I like trolling one of my friends who really hates the show. And it's very easy to troll him by saying that it's great and coming up with excuses for whatever scene. It's so easy to. You just show me any scene from Rings of Power and I can bullshit for like 3 hours about why it's actually good without knowing anything about the show and having never watched it. And I'm just skilled at the art of bullshit when I want to. I used to do my friends in college, we used to play this game called Race to the Bottom, kind of inspired by the Two Best Friends Play channel, at least because of how I named it. But we would just bullshit at each other for hours. And the point of the conversation was to never give up ground on anything that the other person questioned, but to never double down either. Always come up with a new bullshit to defend the last thing you said. It was a terribly stupid game, but we'd play it for hours. Whoever could continue on their bullshit without breaking character would be the winner. And there were never any winners because we would never break character. All right, Thev, question. This is a bit too long. Sorry for a wall of words. There's a book, The 7 Basic Plots, where author explains the types with examples and that they can mix and mash. My question is, how much could this one book be used as a source to make a video to dissect quests as its only one source? I can't find any other similarly made book. How much problem could that make? Svev, here's what I'm going to say. That book is an essay. I'm not familiar with that book, but clearly the person is expressing a personal study about how they view story. Just like with the hero's journey, you should not take a taxonomy that is about a creative perspective, about a creative medium, and try to assign to it a fundamental nature of humanity to it. People have been telling stories for as long as we've been people. And as much as you can find similarities between narratives, you're also going to find an infinite number of specifics and differences. There are not just 7 plots. There are not just 7 basic story structures. There are very, very many. I think it can be helpful to have a taxonomy so long as you remember that you're not defining story by trying to organize it. I think using that as a framework and applying that source's framework is perfectly valid for if you want to use that as a jumping off point for developing a deeper understanding of something else that you want to engage with. That practice is called applied hermeneutics, where you take an existing framework, put it on a piece of medium, a piece of art, and see what comes out. See how your thinking is guided by that framework. And the great thing is, if you do that, you can then do it again and again and again with the same piece of art. And you get different answers every time. And every one of them is a valid experience of that art piece. Art requires an observer to complete the experience. Yeah. Valid so long as you don't dismiss the validity of other perspectives and other possibilities as you are applying your lens. Okay. Reading. Last of Us series seems to be the most faithful adaptation from game to series and is getting a lot of praise, which sucks because at its best, it's the most basic zombie story with just slightly more creative zombies. At worst, it's generally bad story that prioritizes fake drama with convoluted plot points and harmful messages. The best story that came out of the whole franchise was the gay episode. Yeah. Also because it's written with the other person besides Druckmann. All right. The Flesh. Let's say this. I really liked The Last of Us 1. I did not get very far into The Last of Us 2 because when I opened it up and Troy Baker wanted to play his guitar and be the guitar guy at the party and say his feelings on his sleeve, all I could think of was the robot devil from Futurama getting mad at the characters just saying their emotions and how mad that makes him. And it made me mad. And so I stopped playing The Last of Us 2 before any of the stuff came out. I really liked The Last of Us 1. The Last of Us 1 is kind of like a Sony prestige title. It's trying to be cinematic. It is wearing its inspirations on its sleeve. It is the road, the book, the game, the movie, the game. And like, I'm not going to deny that I felt really strongly about the story. I did like how the clickers were different from other zombie narratives. A very large portion of my book, All Puppets Are Bastards, Labor and Liberty in the Age of AI, is actually about zombie narratives and the shared history, the shared relationship between the establishment of zombie narratives and robot narratives in sci-fi. I have a lot of opinions about that. I think The Last of Us 1 was a pretty good story. I do like the dynamics of the gay character, Bill. Bill's his name. Bill? I think it was Bill. Bill's character dynamic was expressed in the original game, and it was fleshed out to be more pointed and direct, to be less, to make it so that it couldn't be overlooked as aggressively as some people really wanted to overlook it in the original. Now, this is not me coming out in defense of Neil Druckmann's business practices or his policies or his politics. I'm just saying that I really liked that story. And it's a great adaptation because it itself is an adaptation of linear novels and movies. For one medium to be inspired by another medium to then create the medium it was inspired by, I think that's a very normal trajectory for a media franchise to want to take. It's fine. At the same time, it is, again, still a different experience to watch the show than to play the game. And personally, no matter how good the show is, I prefer the feelings that I have as I play through the game to experience that story, because I feel the art more in my body than when watching the show, even if the show rules. And you know, I think to adapt a story that is more open, that a game narrative that is more ludic by design is very hard to do as well. But the Fallout series is doing a great job of just taking the setting and telling a story within the setting. So I think there are a lot of different avenues to tell great stories in other mediums inspired by games and the shared aspects that different mediums of art, of storytelling have. I've fallen behind a little bit, but let's see. Valmuth, question. Grandpa, 84 years. I'm watching for a game to help in active mind. He was a metal artisan, but now he can't do a lot of things like before. No idea which gender can be. I think that last sentence might have been related to something else. Yeah, unfortunately, I don't have a good recommendation for what kind of game would be of interest to your grandpa specifically with that context. I think that the best thing to do in terms of staying active at old age is often socializing and doing having more interaction with friends and loved ones. If he shows interest in games, then try just following the muse of what games he expresses interest in, rather than trying to find the game that seems to match him the most. Just expose him to a variety of different things and let him choose for himself. And whatever he chooses for himself, he will probably find something to his taste, if he finds anything in gaming to his taste at all. And if he doesn't, that's also fine. He doesn't have to become a gamer. There are plenty of ways to have an enriching and active mind well into old age through different experiences. My grandmother, before she passed, just a few years, so she passed right before the end of the pandemic. But before the pandemic, my grandmother actually took up boxing at my suggestion. There were boxing classes, and she knew that I liked doing combat sports and martial arts. So she decided to take a boxing class with some of her friends in the home that she was living in. And she had a wonderful time. She loved boxing. My grandmother, like 87, 88 years old, started boxing. Your grandpa can do whatever he wants. Have a great time. Let's see. Svev. Let's see. Okay. You're welcome, Says. Glad I could help. The Dog Stars from Peter Heller. That sounds vaguely familiar, but I don't know. Right now, I'm trying to keep myself away from zombie and robot fiction because I've spent far too much time with it all throughout 2024, like an unhealthy amount of time. Um, I'm going to go back to zombie fiction because I have a different work that I want to focus on, but probably not till 2026. I'm kind of burnt out on zombies, especially because I'm a Haitian American person. I don't like most zombie fiction at its base because it doesn't know what a zombie is, culturally and historically speaking. Um, but yeah, I also recognize that the Hollywood movie monster of the zombie is just a cultural touchstone. Like, I grew up loving zombie fiction before I even knew my own heritage and what a zombie actually is to voodoo. Uh, so I'm just as guilty as everyone else. I'm not going to judge or critique anyone for enjoying zombie fiction, sci-fi zombie fiction, and like even what's his name, Romero, Night of the Living Dead. Um, he had uh, very specific things to say about specifically trying not to uh, fall into the traps of his day, of how zombies were being, how Haitian people were being depicted. Um, there's a Disney comic of Donald Duck looking at a literal ape man and saying, "Is that the zombie?" Because people drew black people as apes and monkeys in those days. And for Romero to be making films going, I'm going to not be racist against the Haitians and make my own movie monster based on the resurrection of the dead. Uh, I think that was great. I think it was a misstep to use the word zombie because West, like European culture, already has multiple undead fantasy creatures that could have been drawn from revenants, whites, vampires, classic. Like there's something to be said about vampires too. They have a racial history too. A little bit of one. Vlad Dracula. A little bit of a political history to vampires. But yeah, I'm not going to judge anyone for wanting to engage with zombie sci-fi fiction. I was also a huge fan. I will probably continue to engage with zombie fiction. You know, it was a really fun game for me, which I don't think anyone else liked. Lollipop Chainsaw. I I fucking love Lollipop Chainsaw. That's one of the dumbest zombie games in the world. I had so much fun with Lollipop Chainsaw. It ruled. All right, let's see. No. All right. Well, y'all have actually kept me going for another half hour since my previous warning. All right, let's see. Yeah, Tech Rot and the Infestation are by far my favorite zombies in fiction. Warframe's Infestation only grows more interesting by the day, by the release, because yeah, it's like it's body horror, it's Cronenberg's, like you're saying, Flesh, but it's also beautiful. Like Warframe, kind of like Land of the Lustrous in a way, is all about making body horror beautiful. And like, if it were just like gore and disturbing, like gorer, I couldn't hang, because that's not my scene. I can't really deal with that. But Warframe's aesthetic is different, and I don't know what it is about it, but I think there is an inherent empathy with how they have constructed the entire dynamic around the infestation. And with the new things that we've learned about it with the 1999 update, it's even more fascinating that it has. I won't do spoilers. Spoilers for that in my Warframe 1999 video, but it's very cool. When I make that video, eventually, it's taking so long, oh my God. But it will get done. It will get done. Let's see, Valmuth, hyperfocus and interest theme. I know that feel. Recently, I had I don't know what you mean. I know you're talking about an experience with your autism. Holy sh! You read all of the 2025 D&D books in a week? Yo. That's hyperfocus. That was a week. I get that feel sometimes with some things, but that's still intense, because those books are dry. I love D&D, but oh my God, it's an encyclopedia. Reading the encyclopedia is dry. It's not interesting. Yes, I do go on into deep dives with the British, with the Encyclopedia Britannica sometimes, but D&D is a rule book. I'm glad you had fun, Valmuth. I hope you took care of yourself that week. I hope you didn't go too hard. I hope you were still eating protein and wearing your seatbelts. Okay. Water's empty. No more water. So I'll take one more question. Who's it going to be? We'll take one more question and call it a night. Yes, Flesh. Very Geiger-esque. Especially, Geiger was also a major inspiration for Land of the Lustrous. If I recall an interview like that correctly, the mangaka did say something about that. And I really feel as though Citrine had some influence from Land of the Lustrous in that design aesthetic. Right. That was not a question, that was a comment. So I will still wait. Right. That was not a question, that was a comment. So I will still wait for one last question to end the stream on. You're welcome, Mayahara. I try to be informative. I try to also be inspirational. I don't try to be as inspirational as informative, but if one comes out of the other, bully for me. I'm glad that you are enjoying everything as much as you do, and that you've been sticking around for quite some time now. Foot surgery. All right. Hey, not being able to walk is a great reason to read a lot of books. I'm glad that the words feet G did not mean anything, because I don't know, man. Y'all do you. I'll keep what I do to myself. Foot surgery must have been rough. Yeah, I haven't had a surgery of any kind since my wisdom teeth were taken out. My wisdom tooth surgery was probably the most major surgery of my life. And I hope to keep it that way. Let's see. What is the game that you have hated the most? Not only in a way that it played, but also the other elements like story, visuals, or irked you the wrong way. It's between two. I have two games that I hate a lot, both in the way they play and in the story that they tell and how they tell it. Game number 1, The Guided Fate Paradox, is a grid-based, I guess, dungeon diver with bump action. You bump into other enemies on the tile to do your attack. And also, you're not allowed to see the video. The default of the game is to blacken out 50% of the screen in like a lens, a crushed lens. And then there is a status condition that will shrink that visual even tighter to just around your character and nothing else. So most of the time, you're only looking at a black screen for the whole game. I hate it. It's not appealing. The story, I barely remember. It was told in Japanese visual novel style. I don't care. The gameplay had me gone, and yeah, it was shaping up to be like a very preachy, very self-righteous narrative anyway. I have two videos about this game specifically. One is an anime video talking about how to spot a pretentious anime from forever ago, and the other is called. It was from my Gamer Gonzo journalism series. That was talking about the worst design choice in games. And you can tell from the thumbnail that aesthetic. All right, game number 2 for my most hated game, both gameplay-wise and story. It's called Artanelico Koga, Knell of RCL. That, no, Flash, it couldn't work as a horror game. Not the way it set itself up on a grid. It was a turn-based grid, walking around, bump into things game. If you want to see darkness as a mechanic done well in horror, just go back to just go back to Amnesia: The Dark Descent. Perfect. That should be the inspiration point, not the Guided Fate Paradox. But yeah, Artanelico Koga, Knell of RCL. Unbeknownst to me, was actually the third game in a series that did not number its series, so that you wouldn't be dissuaded from purchasing a game that had the word 3 on it. It had all original characters that weren't featured in prior episodes of the series, except for one, which you were supposed to know by external logic from the game, that you were supposed to have your main character romance that character in the visual novel portions of the game. And if you don't romance the correct character and do the correct things with certain aspects of the game's combat against certain bosses, you are locked into a multiple-hour run towards a bad end that blocks you from experiencing the latter third of the game's entire runtime. So you only learn that you have made the wrong choice, done the wrong thing, and gotten the bad end after you've played an extra like 12 hours of game. The combat system was a weird attempt at trying to combine an action RPG with music rhythm games. So you had to be pressing things in the moment and also choosing the right attacks to match different parts of the music bars that were running across the bottom of the screen. And mastering that system was absolutely necessary for defeating some of the major bosses within the time limits that the bosses were given, because bosses were given real world time limits of how quickly you had to defeat them using this system. But you didn't need to really learn or master the system at all to fight any of the encounters and overcome any of the counters leading up to the boss. So it simultaneously required mastery at a limited time boss fight, which was important in terms of determining how the future of the story and how much of the game you would get to play after that boss fight, whether you win or lose. And never taught how to use the system, succeed at the system that they were presenting you. Yeah. I would never want to play a game like that again or even give it a second shot, because it was, I thought it was fine as I was going forward. I found out that I actually got that bad end like 12 hours prior, and that I had been romancing the wrong character to progress in the game, despite being given the option to romance different characters. I have never played a game that fought against itself harder than Artonel Koga Nel of RCL. And that name is burned into my mind as the shittest game I've ever played. I dislike it. I dislike it with a passion. And I will never change my mind about this. Never. And it's a good thing that the game I hate most is a game that most people have never heard of and will not care about. The corners of shame for you. Both of the romanceable options were same-sex options in Artonelico Koga. The one that I thought was the more believable development of a romantic relationship between two adults was the wrong choice. The correct choice was your busty little sister, because of course it was, because anime. To a character, you're like my little sister, and I will love and protect you. That's not a familial relationship you're building. This was anime bullshit. And I love anime. I watch a lot. I have watched a lot of anime. This was some creepy anime bullshit. This was trash. Yeah. Yeah. And those were the only two options. Yep. Cool note to end the stream on. Oh, man. Yeah. Listen. Things that are cool and good and awesome. If we didn't end on trash, we aren't living. You need trash in your life. You need terrible, shitty, horrible experiences, because even having shitty experiences can be fun. Just don't do the shitty experiences by yourself like I did. Do it like how my wife and I watched the DMC anime. Horrible time together with alcohol in a safe and controlled environment with lots of popcorn. That's the way to do it. And on that note of philosophical cynicism and my camera deciding that it doesn't know how to be in focus anymore, come back. Here we go. We are going to close the stream. Like in the words of Chainsaw Man, without bad movies, we can't enjoy the good ones.